This is part of the mini-series on resilience. And the first pillar, the first skill that we discussed was focus. And we cannot have focus if we didn't craft our purpose or our guiding principles. My name is Gianluca Cinquepalmi. You're listening to GLC Live, my podcast dedicated to business design. I'm an educator, design entrepreneur, and best-selling author. This show is dedicated to designers, creatives, and entrepreneurs that, like me, want to reskill and challenge, disrupt, and inspire the business and design industry. In this episode, purpose. So, as we dive into our research for purpose, we can discuss about methodologies. So, without purpose, without our guiding principle, it's very hard to avoid distraction. And nowadays, in this moment in time, there is a lot of noise surrounding us. So in these times of hardship, I would say, it's easy to feel lost and to have a lot of noise going on in our head, but also surrounding us. And it's time to self-reflect. And there is something that I'm very passionate about, which is how do we craft our purpose? How do we develop purpose? And I believe that is not something that we truly search for, but it's something that we can build upon. And there is something that we can look at, and is something that we can redefine. It's not something that stays still. It's like a business plan. I always say a business plan is not a static document. It's a dynamic document. And so is our purpose. So this is something that we can reshape and redefine as we grow, as we develop, as we become different. So these are perfect times for self-reflection. So I like to think about purpose in the form of what kind of practice we can develop. What is it that we can think about and work towards to define this purpose, or to better craft this purpose? So I believe in this programmatic process, this practice. And in Business Beyond Design, I talk about one specific quote that is very meaningful to me. And is a quote taken by The Art of Strategy from Dr. Dixit and Neil Buff. And this quote states that science and art, by their very nature, are different in that science can be learned in systematic and logical way, whereas expertise in the art has to be acquired by example, experience, and practice. So what is this practice? Now, is there a practice that we can type into? And there is a Japanese philosophy which is called IKIGAI. And IKIGAI stands for reason for being, and is being defined as the art of living. And I love this Japanese concept because it has a dual meaning. It stands for a life worth living, which is the being part, and a life worth living for, which is the doing part. So this Japanese concept has been I think it's been developed in so many different ways and it's been talked about in many different ways. I also did a specific episode on this in season 1. And I believe Christoph from the future also talked about this. So just as a as a reference, you can see how there are 4 main areas, and usually this Ikigai is represented through this Venn diagram, where we have these 4 elements. So what is it that we love? What is it that we are good at? What is it that we can be paid for? And what is it that the world needs? And if we can, in a way, merge, or if we can list all these 4 elements, then the result of this reflection is what we call our Ikigai, our reason for being. So I approach this exercise in a slightly different way than others, because I like to be a little bit more pragmatic. So what I would like to do is to dive into each and every single element and try to give you some reflection points, some directions that we can all learn from. So let's dive into the very first element, which is, what is it that you love? So what is it that we love? This is sometimes a difficult question. And if you have heard the saying, do what you love, I have a different approach. I think we should love what we do, because not always we have the luxury to do the things that we are truly passionate about. So on the other side, I believe that we can find beauty and we can find interest and we can be curious to whatever it is that we do. So if in a way we are lost and we have, like me, right? I have a lot of passions. There are many, many different things that I love. An interesting way that we can discover this love is, what is it that we are passionate about so much that we are willing to spend money for? Is it travel? Is it food? Is it knowledge, meaning books, courses? What are we spending our time and money towards? This is usually an interesting indication on the things that we love. And this is not easy as well. Sometimes it's confusing. Sometimes it's not so straightforward. So one time I found myself in reflecting on what, especially when I was changing career, is I tried to define what is it that I loved and etc. And I did this small exercise and I said, okay, if I had $10 million, what would I do? Which means not how I would spend the $10 million, of course, because the easy answer to this is buy fancy cars and travel the world and buy a yacht. But how would my day to day will look like if I had $10 million? And this is an interesting exercise that we can do and try to find what is it that we would do. And funny enough, when I did this exercise, I realized that pretty much I was already doing most of the things that I love: teaching, coaching, consulting, creating, studying. So all of these things were things that I already loved. I just needed to find a way to then monetize that and to find a way to earn a living by doing that. Which leads us to the next point, which is, what is it that we can be paid for? And I thought hard about this, if I wanted to keep it or not. But in reality, this is interesting because it's a reflection on something that, what is it, the value that you can provide? And the value that you can provide in this second, in this moment, which means today I can get paid for, I don't know, go and serve tables. Fantastic. That's a way to earn something. I don't know, cooking, designing in my case, or lecturing. This is your track record and is your to say, okay, if I can get paid, even, waiting tables, but I'm very interested in becoming a chef. That's a good strategy, Start going to a very interesting restaurant where you are close to amazing chefs, and you can start waiting tables there, and then slowly work your way up to the kitchen, for example. So you have to focus on this point on what is it, the value that you provide, so much that people are willing to exchange their money for your services. This leads to another point, to our next point, which is, what are you really good at? So this is in contraposition with what we discussed previously, meaning that they should be aligned, the fact that you're really good at something and you should be paid for, but sometimes this is not the case. So this is also a reflection on what could be an alternative career. So beside your career, which is whatever you're doing now, what are the recognized skills that you possess, that you can be recognized for? Maybe you are a very good communicator and you never thought that you could use that to this as a potential career, maybe in sales. And on the other part is, what are those skills that you want to develop, right? If you would possess these skills, what would you do? Right? So if you are developing this interesting skill set that you think will make you really good at something, what is it that they would be? How would they look like? And another thing that I always try to do as an exercise was to create what I called a dream clients list. So in a way, I listed all the potential clients that I would love to work for. And then asking myself, am I skilled enough? Am I good enough to work for, I don't know, this client or that client? And just ask your friends, ask your colleagues, or ask your loved ones, and just direct message them and say, hey, what do you think I'm really good at beside my career? And maybe you will figure out, and you will notice, you will learn some insight, they are called, that you were not aware of. Maybe you are a very calm person, so you're really good in calming people down. So something that you can build upon. And the next point is what the world needs. This point is very interesting. Why we need to think about what the world needs? Well, first of all is, if you say, oh, I love to watch TV and eat Cheetos all day, probably this is something that you can't really define your skill level, so what you're really good at. And this is something that probably you're not gonna get paid for unless you review all the shows. But this implies the fact that you have the skills of writing. And definitely maybe that's not a skill that the world needs. So when we talk about the world, what the world needs, not necessarily these are all the, like I said in other times, saving the world, fighting disease and curing malaria. In my case, I'm pretty sure that everybody needs to become better and to reskill. So I decided that that's part of my purpose, and I'm sure that the world needs more knowledge. And that's what I'm focusing on. And a trick to identify if you are not sure about this point, you can make this exercise and say, I would swap place with who? Just somebody that you admire, and try to think, what demand are they feeling? Like I could say, oh, Adam Grant is an amazing professor and he's doing a podcast, he's an entrepreneur, I would swap place with him. Or I don't know, Malcolm Gladwell is this amazing author, and Simon Sinek is another amazing author. I would swap place with them. So what demand are they feeling? How they are feeling that demand? If you can be as specific as you can in creating a vision of what would you do if you were suddenly in their own shoes, if you were in their own skin, and write it down. And there you find that because they are successful and because they are feeling a demand, you can understand that's proof that the world needs that product or service. So if we can put everything together, and in a way you can then distill down to the bone these 4 elements. What is it that you love? And you wrote it down. You wrote down these 3 key points. And you wrote down what is it that you can be paid for. And you wrote down those 3 key points. And you designed and you wrote what is it that you are really good at. And then you identified what is it that the world needs. And you can try to create, just literally draw some connections, draw some branches that connect what do you love, what the world needs, what you can be paid for, what you are really good at. And you might start finding some activities that intersect, and at this intersection you can say, for me, when I tried to do this exercise, I love to talk about design and brand and strategy. I loved strategy. And what could I be paid for? I ran an agency for many years. So I said, okay, I know that I can be paid to craft and to manage this strategy, which basically was saying, I've been teaching other people how to cure their brands. What are you good at? I realized that, for example, for me, it was very easy for me to communicate to people, to connect with those people, and to explain my ideas to people. That is what I was good at. And then in terms of needs, I said, wow, maybe I can, I looked at a lot of people and I saw that people needed guidance, people needed education on this subject. And so my purpose shifted from creating something and designing into teaching and coaching. And this shifted in the years. So also don't forget that this is not something that we do only once, but is a lifelong process. This can change. So if with a specific cadence, we can say, we try to do this exercise and we renew our thoughts and our purpose, and we write it down. My purpose is, and you put together these 4 elements into one declarative sentence, then you have something that you can focus on. That is something that you have crafted. So this is the overall overview of the art of living, the art of crafting your purpose. So don't search for purpose, but craft your purpose like an artist. This is the end of this short episode. So like always, before we leave, I want to inform you that until May, I decided to create an area where you can book some talks on calls with me. I reduce 50% of my coaching fee. And so If you want to talk, if you want to discuss on how you can find purpose, how you can redefine your priorities, please don't hesitate to contact me. And like always, I'm Gianluca Cinquepalmi. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Please subscribe and comment on Apple Podcast, now also with this new YouTube channel. And I'll see you on the next episode.